May 1945, Oldenburg, Germany. The morning air smelled like smoke and dust. A thin German woman stood on the sidewalk, her hands shaking. She wore a coat that was once nice, but now had holes in it. Her fingers gripped a small cloth bag so tight her knuckles turned white. She looked at the ground, then up at the young soldier standing guard, then back down again. The soldier was barely 22 years old. He stood outside a big house that the Canadian Army had taken over. His uniform was clean and pressed. His rifle hung on his shoulder. He tried to look straight ahead, the way soldiers are supposed to, but he could see the woman from the corner of his eye. She had been walking past his post over and over for the last 10 minutes. Finally, she stopped. She was only 5 feet away from him now. The soldier could hear her breathing, fast and scared. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Bitte," she whispered. That was German for please. Then she switched to broken English. "Please, es meine Kinder. My children are hungry." The soldier went stiff. His heart started beating fast. He knew the rules. Everyone knew the rules. General Order Number 1 said it clear as day. No talking to Germans. No being nice to Germans. No helping Germans. The order came straight from the top commanders. Any soldier caught being friendly to the enemy could lose his pay. He could lose his rank. He could even go to military prison. This is the true story of what happened when a desperate German mother begged a Canadian soldier for food in the final days of the World War II. What he did next shocked everyone, including her. The war had just ended 8 days ago. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. The fighting stopped. The guns went quiet, but the suffering did not stop. All across Germany, people were starving. The bombs had destroyed half the houses in the big cities. The trains did not run anymore. Trucks could not get through on the broken roads. Food could not reach the cities where people lived. In the parts of Germany where Canadian and British soldiers were in charge, more than 3 million people faced starvation. 3 million. That is more people than live in some whole countries. In Oldenburg, the city where the soldier stood guard, over 15,000 people were so hungry they might die. The German people got ration cards for food, but the rations were tiny, only 200 calories per day. A grown person needs 2,400 calories just to survive. The Germans were getting half of what they needed. Children were getting even less. They were wasting away, getting thinner and weaker every day. The Allied commanders did not care. They said the Germans deserved to suffer. After all, Germany started the war. German soldiers killed millions of people. German bombs destroyed whole cities in other countries. Why should Allied soldiers show mercy now? So they made the rules strict, very strict. No fraternization, they called it. That means no friendship, no kindness, no help. Soldiers were told to look through the Germans like they were ghosts. Do not shake hands. Do not share food. Do not smile. Do not treat them like human beings. Just last week, a soldier named Private Cooper gave a piece of chocolate to a German child. The child was maybe 6 years old, with big hungry eyes. Cooper could not help himself. He handed over one small chocolate bar. His sergeant saw it happen. Cooper lost 2 weeks of pay as punishment. Another soldier, everyone heard, got 30 days in the stockade. That is military jail. His crime? He helped an old German woman carry water from a well. 30 days locked up for one act of kindness. Lieutenant Morrison had given the warning to the soldiers' whole company just 3 days ago. Next man who shows sympathy to these people gets the stockade, he said. His voice was hard and cold. I do not care if it is an old lady or a baby. They are the enemy. Treat them like the enemy. Now this thin German woman stood in front of the soldier, begging. Her eyes were red like she had been crying. Her cheeks were hollow. She looked like she had not eaten a good meal in months. Maybe she had not. She held out her cloth bag and opened it. "Look," she said. "No. No weapons, just empty. Please, I have 3 kinder, 3 children. They are so hungry. Please." The soldier felt his stomach twist. He knew he should turn her away. He should say no. He should maybe even report her for approaching him. That is what his training told him to do. That is what the orders said. But her eyes. He could not stop looking at her eyes. They were the same eyes his own mother had during the Great Depression back home in Canada. His family had been poor then. His mother had that same desperate look when there was not enough food, when she did not know how she would feed her children. The soldier glanced to his left. 50 feet away was a window. His sergeant was inside that building. If the sergeant looked out and saw this, it would be over. Court-martial, for sure. Maybe worse. He looked back at the woman. She was trembling now, waiting, hoping. Her whole body shook with fear and hunger and desperate hope. The soldier had maybe 30 seconds to decide. 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. His heart pounded so loud he could hear it in his ears. His palms started to sweat even though the morning was cool. Follow the orders and turn her away? That was safe. That kept him out of trouble. No one would blame him. The rules were clear. Or help her? Risk everything. Risk his pay, his rank, his freedom. Risk military prison just to feed 3 German children he had never met? What would you do? This young Canadian private stood at that crossroads between duty and conscience, between orders and humanity. The woman waited, her empty bag held out like a prayer. The sergeant's window loomed 50 feet away. The choice had to be made now. What he decided in those next few seconds would change both of their lives forever. The Canadian. Soldiers first came into Germany in February 1945. That was 3 months before the war ended. They came from the west, pushing through Holland and then crossing the border into enemy territory. The fighting was hard. The Germans did not give up easy. Every town, every river, every field was a battle. By April, the 1st Canadian Army had won control of a big piece of northwest Germany. Over 180,000 Canadian troops spread out across the land. Their job was to keep control of everything from the Dutch border all the way through cities like Oldenburg and Bremen, then eastward. It was a huge area, and the Canadians were in charge of all of it. Private James MacDonald was one of those 180,000 soldiers. He was 22 years old, born and raised in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. That is a small island on the east coast of Canada where the winters are cold and the people are tough. Jamie, as his friends called him, signed up to fight in 1943 when he was just 20. He wanted to do his part, like so many young men back then. Jamie did not get to Europe until February 1945. That meant he only saw 8 weeks of real combat before Germany surrendered on May 8th. 8 weeks of shooting and explosions and fear. 8 weeks of watching friends get hurt or killed. It was enough, more than enough. Now, in May 1945, Jamie's job had changed. No more fighting. Now he stood guard. He processed paperwork for displaced persons. He stopped people from looting the empty buildings. He was part of the occupation force. The war was over, but the soldiers still had work to do. Jamie was part of the North Nova Scotia Highlanders. They were good men, most of them. Farm boys and fishermen and factory workers from back home. They had fought hard to beat the Germans. Now they were supposed to keep the peace and make sure Germany stayed defeated. But the peace was harder than Jamie expected. The things he saw every day made his stomach hurt. He wrote letters home to his mother and father, trying to explain it. In one letter, he wrote, "The children look like ghosts. I never seen people so thin. Even during the Depression, we had it better than this." The rules from headquarters were clear and harsh. The orders came from something called Chef. That stood for Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. sounded important because it was important. General Eisenhower himself, the top commander, signed the Non-Fraternization Order back in September 1944. The rule said soldiers could not talk to Germans except for official military business. No shaking hands, no giving gifts, no showing mercy. The idea was that all Germans were guilty. They started the war. They followed Hitler. They deserved whatever they got. Being nice to them, the generals said, would only help the enemy recover. If a soldier broke these rules, the punishment was serious. He could lose his pay for weeks. He could get bumped down in rank. Or worst of all, he could face a court-martial and end up in the stockade, which was military jail. The threat was real and everyone knew it. Germany in May 1945 was a broken land. The Allied bombing raids had destroyed half the houses in the major cities. Some places looked like the surface of the moon, nothing but rubble and craters. The railroads were smashed. The bridges were blown up. The roads had huge holes from bombs. This meant food could not get from the farms to the cities where people lived. 7 million displaced persons wandered around Germany with nowhere to go. These were people from all over Europe that the Germans had brought to work as slaves. Now they were free but had no homes to return to. They roamed the countryside looking for food and shelter. German money was worthless. You could not buy anything with it. Instead, people traded on the black market. A watch for a loaf of bread. A wedding ring for a pound of flour. Desperate times. In Oldenburg, where Jamie stood guard, the children were suffering the most. On average, kids had lost 15 to 18 pounds since January. Their cheeks were sunken. Their arms were like sticks. The hospitals reported over 300 cases of severe malnutrition every single week, just in that one city. 300 children starving, week after week. Jamie's normal day started at 6 in the morning. He ate breakfast with his unit. Good food, plenty of it. Eggs, bread, bacon, coffee. More food than most Germans saw in a week. Then he went on guard duty or helped process the endless lines of displaced persons. He saw dozens of German civilians every single day. They walked past him on the street, thin, quiet, their eyes empty. The orders were to look through them, not at them, pretend they were not there. His sergeant said it plain. These people are nothing to you. Look through them like they are invisible. Some of the other soldiers took it further. They mocked any man who showed sympathy. Remember what they did, they would say. Remember the camps. Remember the cities they bombed. They deserve this. But Jamie could not stop thinking about his own family. He had 2 little sisters back home, ages 5 and 8, Mary and Beth. He loved them more than anything. When he saw the German children, all bones and hungry eyes, he thought about Mary and Beth. What if that was them? What if they were the ones starving? That thought kept him awake at night. It made his chest feel tight. Every day he saw the suffering, and every day he was told to ignore it, to feel nothing, to show no mercy. This was Jamie's normal. Day after day of seeing human misery and being ordered to treat people like they were less than human. It wore on him. It made him wonder what kind of man he would become if he followed these orders forever. The German woman's name was Anna Hoffmann. She was 34 years old, though she looked much older. The war had aged her. In 1944, her husband died fighting on the Eastern Front against the Russians. She got the telegram one cold November morning. After that, she was alone with 3 children and no one to help. Anna had 3 kids. Greta was 9 years old. Carl was 6. Little Marie was only 3. Before the war, they lived in a nice apartment with 4 rooms. Anna's husband worked at a factory. They had enough money. The children had toys and warm clothes. Life was good, or at least normal. Now everything was gone. The factory where her husband worked was bombed flat. Their apartment building took a direct hit in March. The whole top floor was blown off. Anna and her children lived in 2 rooms on the second floor. The windows were broken. The wind came through at night. They had 1 blanket to share between all 4 of them. Anna had no income, no job, no relatives left alive to help. Her parents died in a bombing raid. Her sister lived in Berlin, and Anna had not heard from her in 6 months. She was probably dead too. Everyone was probably dead. The worst part was the ration cards. Anna had ration cards that let her get a tiny bit of food each week, but she lost them when the apartment was bombed. She went to the office to get new ones. They said it would take 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Her children could not wait 6 weeks. For 3 days now, Anna's children had eaten nothing but watered-down cabbage soup. She found 1 half-rotten cabbage in a garbage pile. She boiled it with water to make it last. The soup was mostly just hot water with a cabbage taste. It was something, but it was not enough. On the morning of May 12th, Anna woke up and looked at her children. What she saw made her want to cry, but she had no tears left. Little Marie, only 3 years old, was too weak to stand up. She just lay on the mattress, staring at nothing. Her lips were cracked and dry. Carl, the 6-year-old boy, sat against the wall. Anna could see every single one of his ribs through his thin shirt. His arms looked like sticks. His face was all sharp angles, no softness left. But Greta scared Anna the most. Greta was 9 and the oldest. She had not complained once, not once. A normal 9-year-old girl would cry, would beg for food, would ask why she was hungry. Greta said nothing. She just sat very still and quiet, like she had given up. That silence was the most frightening thing Anna had ever heard. Anna made a decision. She would break the unwritten rule. She would approach a soldier and beg. Everyone knew you did not bother the soldiers. The soldiers were dangerous. They could arrest you. They could send you away. They could do worse things that people whispered about but did not say out loud. But Anna was watching her children die. Slow starvation is a terrible death. She could not just sit there and let it happen. She would take the risk. Maybe the soldier would help. Maybe he would arrest her. Either way, she had to try. Anna stood at her broken window and looked out at the gray morning. She made her decision final. She would go now, before she lost her courage, before fear paralyzed her completely. She picked up the small cloth bag, checking one more time that it was empty. No hidden items that might make the soldiers suspicious. Just an empty bag that showed she had nothing, needed everything. "I will be back soon," she told her children, though she was not sure if that was true. Greta looked up at her with those 2 old eyes. Carl managed a weak nod. Little Marie did not even respond, too weak to care. Anna stepped out into the street. The morning air was cold. Her thin coat did nothing to stop the wind. She walked with purpose toward the area where she had seen Canadian soldiers on patrol. Each step felt like walking toward either salvation or destruction, maybe both. She thought about what she would say. She practiced the English words in her mind. Please, children, hungry. Simple words, but they carried the weight of 3 lives in them. As she turned the corner and saw the young soldier standing guard in the distance, her heart began to race. This was it. No turning back now. Her children's lives depended on what happened in the next few minutes. Jamie MacDonald opened his mouth. The word no was right there, ready to come out. That was the safe answer. The right answer according to the rules. Just say no, turn around, and pretend this never happened. But then he heard his mother's voice. Not a real voice, just a memory from her last letter. She had written, "I hope you're staying human over there, Jamie. War can make men forget who they are. Do not let it change you." Jamie looked at Anna's trembling hands. He thought about 3 children somewhere nearby, waiting for their mother to come home, waiting to see if she brought food. 3 kids with empty bellies and no hope left. His hand moved before his brain could stop it. Jamie did not say a word. Words could be heard. Words could be reported. Instead, he made eye contact with Anna for the first time, just for 1 second. Then he gave the smallest nod, so small that anyone watching might miss it. His hand slipped into his jacket pocket. Inside was his lunch ration. Every soldier got lunch to carry with them during guard duty. Jamie pulled it out. 2 thick slices of bread wrapped in brown paper, a tin of corned beef, a chocolate bar. That was his whole lunch. But it was not enough. 3 kids needed more than that. Jamie glanced around fast. No officers in sight, no other soldiers nearby. The street was empty except for a few Germans in the distance who were not paying attention. He reached down to his haversack, the bag every soldier carried. Inside, he had more food he was saving. A chunk of yellow cheese, a pack of crackers, 1 red apple. He added all of it. Then Jamie did something that could get him in even more trouble. He reached deeper into his haversack and pulled out a half-pound bag of sugar. He had taken it from the mess hall that morning. Well, taken was a nice word for it. He stole it. He saw it sitting on a shelf and stuffed it in his bag when the cook was not looking. Jamie had planned to send the sugar home to his mother and sisters. Sugar was hard to get in Canada because of rationing. His family would love it. But these German children needed it more. The whole decision took maybe 20 seconds. 20 seconds to choose between following orders and following his heart. 20 seconds to risk his entire military career. Jamie stepped closer to Anna. He pretended to check her papers like this was official business. His hands moved quick. He transferred the food from his pockets and bag into her cloth sack. Bread, corned beef, cheese, crackers, apple, chocolate, sugar. All of it went into her bag. If anyone caught him, he was done. Court-martial for sure. Maybe 30 days in the stockade. Maybe worse. Maybe a dishonorable discharge that would follow him for the rest of his life. No job would hire a man with a dishonorable discharge. But Jamie whispered 2 words in broken German. Für die Kinder. That meant, for the children. He did not speak German well, but he knew those words. Then in English, knowing Anna might not understand, he added, God forgive us all. He did not know if he meant God should forgive the Germans for starting the war, or the Allies for letting children starve, or himself for breaking the rules. Maybe all of it. Anna's eyes filled with tears. Real tears. The first she had cried in weeks. All the fear and hunger and desperation came pouring out. She tried to say, "Thank you." The words started to come from her mouth. Jamie cut her off. His voice was sharp, almost mean. Go. Now. Schnell. Schnell was German for fast or hurry. He had to sound harsh. If anyone was listening, it had to seem like he was sending her away, not helping her. His tone was rough, but his eyes were soft. He was protecting both of them. Anna understood. She clutched the bag to her chest like it was made of gold. She turned and walked away as fast as she could without running. Her shoulders shook. She was crying, but she did not look back. Looking back might draw attention. Jamie returned to his post. He stood up straight, rifle on his shoulder, eyes forward, like nothing happened. But inside his chest, his heart was racing like a drum. His hands shook a little, so he gripped his rifle tight to keep them still. He waited for someone to shout, waited for his sergeant to come storming out of the building, waited for the military police to show up and arrest him. Every sound made him jump, a door closing, footsteps, a truck engine starting down the street. Each one felt like the end, but nothing happened. No one came, no one saw, except someone did see. Up on the 3rd floor of a building across the street, a German man stood at his window. His name was Herr Schmidt. He used to be an officer in the Wehrmacht, the German army. Now he was just another defeated, enemy watching the occupation. Herr Schmidt saw the whole thing. He saw Jamie hand over the food. He saw Anna walk away crying. He saw the young Canadian soldier standing there after, trying to look normal while his hand shook. Herr Schmidt said nothing. He did not report it. He did not tell anyone. But something changed in how he saw these Canadian soldiers. Maybe they were not all cruel. Maybe some of them were still human. Back at his post, Jamie felt like he might throw up. The fear was like a weight in his stomach. He was convinced someone would report him any second. Every minute that passed felt like an hour. At noon, the other soldiers came out for lunch break. "Hey, MacDonald, you eating?" one of them called. Jamie shook his head. "Not hungry," he said. His voice sounded normal somehow. Inside, he was screaming, but outside, he looked calm. "You feeling okay?" his friend asked. "Yeah, fine. Just not hungry today." The truth was, he had given away his lunch. He would skip eating until dinner. That was okay. He could handle being hungry for a few hours. Those 3 German children had been hungry for days. Meanwhile, Anna ran home. Not a real run, more like a fast walk. She could not draw attention, but inside she was flying. She burst through the door of her broken apartment. The children looked up, Greta, Carl, and little Marie. Their faces were so thin and pale. Anna opened the cloth bag. The children's eyes went wide. Bread, real bread, and meat in a tin, and cheese, and an apple, and chocolate. "Mama," Greta whispered. She could not believe it. Anna divided the food carefully. She made it into 4 portions, 1 for each of them. The corned beef was salty and rich. The bread was soft and fresh. She gave each child a small piece of chocolate. She saved most of the food for later to make it last. This food could keep them alive for 3 days, maybe 4 if she was careful with it. Little Marie smiled for the first time in over a week. She had chocolate on her lips. A tiny bit of color came back to her cheeks, just from having something in her belly. Carl asked, "Mama, where did this come from?" Anna paused. She had told her children that all soldiers were bad, that they could not trust the men in uniforms. Now she had to tell them different. "Ein guter Soldat," she said quietly. "A good soldier." Carl looked confused. "But you said all soldiers are bad." Anna felt tears on her face again. "I was wrong, mein Liebling. Some men are good, even in uniform, even when they are supposed to be our enemies. Some men are still good." Anna knew the food had to last. She could not let her children eat it all at once, even though they were so hungry. That night she gave them each a small portion, 1 slice of bread with a thin layer of corned beef, a few crackers, a tiny piece of cheese. She cut the apple into 12 pieces, so it would last 3 days. The children wanted more. Of course they did, but Anna said no. "We must make it last," she told them. "This food will keep us alive, but only if we are smart." She hid the rest in a box under a loose floorboard. The sugar, the chocolate, most of the bread and cheese. She would give them small amounts each day. If she was very careful, this food could last 3 days, maybe even 4. That night, little Marie fell asleep with a full belly for the first time in weeks. She smiled in her sleep. Carl curled up next to his sisters, his stomach not hurting any more. Greta, the 9-year-old, whispered to her mother before bed, "Mama, tell the soldier thank you if you see him again." Anna nodded. "I will, my sweet girl, I will." But Anna lay awake for hours. She kept thinking about the young soldier. He looked so scared when he gave her the food. His hands shook. He could get in terrible trouble for what he did. Maybe he already was in trouble. Maybe someone saw and reported him. She prayed that night. Anna had not prayed in a long time. The war made her stop believing in God. But that night she prayed that the young Canadian soldier would be safe, that no one would punish him for his kindness. Across town, Jamie MacDonald could not sleep either. He lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling. Every time he heard footsteps in the hall, he thought it was the military police coming to arrest him. Every time a door opened, his heart jumped. His mind played the scene over and over. What if someone saw? What if the sergeant was looking out the window? What if another soldier noticed the food missing from his haversack? What if? What if? What if? At 2 a.m, Jamie got up and sat at the small desk in the barracks. He pulled out paper and a pen. He wrote a letter home to his mother. He wanted to tell her what he did. He wanted to say he helped a starving mother and her children. He wanted her to know he stayed human like she asked. But he could not write any of that. All letters home got read by censors. If he mentioned giving food to Germans, the censors would report him. He would be arrested before the letter even made it to Canada. Instead, Jamie wrote, "Dear Ma, I hope this letter finds you, and Pa and the girls well. Things are quiet here now that the fighting is done. I am safe, so do not worry. I saw some things today that reminded me why we are human beings first and soldiers second. I hope I make you proud. I think about you and the girls every day. Love, Jamie." He read it over twice. It did not say much, but it said what he needed to say without getting himself in trouble. He folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and addressed it. When he finally tried to sleep again, it was almost dawn. He got maybe 2 hours of rest. In his dreams, he saw Anna's face, her desperate eyes, her shaking hands. He woke up in a cold sweat. The next morning at breakfast, Jamie's bunkmate noticed something was wrong. "You okay, MacDonald? You look terrible." Jamie just nodded. "Yeah, fine. Did not sleep well." "Nightmares again?" "Something like that." His friend did not push. A lot of soldiers had nightmares. The war did that to men. For 2 days, Jamie jumped at every sound. Every time an officer walked past, he thought this was it. This was when they arrest me. But nothing happened. No one came. No one said anything. On the 3rd day, May 14th, Jamie was on patrol walking his usual route. He passed the fence post where Anna had stood 2 days before. Something caught his eye. A small piece of cloth tied to the post. Jamie looked around. No one was watching. He stepped closer. It was a handkerchief. White cloth with tiny blue flowers embroidered on the edges. The stitching was beautiful, done by hand with great care. Jamie understood immediately. This was from Anna. This was her way of saying thank you. She could not speak to him again without drawing attention, so she left this gift where she knew he would find it. He picked up the handkerchief and held it in his hand. It was so delicate, so carefully made. This was probably the only nice thing Anna had left. Maybe it belonged to her mother or grandmother. It was precious to her, and she gave it to him. Jamie looked around again to make sure no one was watching. Then he folded the handkerchief carefully and put it in his breast pocket, right over his heart. He would keep it there for the rest of his time in Germany. In fact, he would keep it for the rest of his life. Something changed in Jamie after that. He started to notice the other soldiers in his unit acting different too. Within a few days, other men began quietly helping Germans. Private Wilson, who bunked next to Jamie, started giving his chocolate ration to children he saw on the street. He did it sneaky when no officers were looking. A quick handoff and then keep walking. Corporal Davies left bread near places where he knew families were sheltering. He would set it down, walk away, and not look back. The bread would be gone an hour later. Even the sergeant, the same one Jamie feared would report him, started looking the other way. One afternoon, the sergeant saw Private Wilson hand chocolate to a little girl. The sergeant stopped, watched, and then just kept walking. He pretended he saw nothing. Later, the sergeant told the men something surprising. "I lost my own kids to the flu back in '38, he said quietly. "Both of them, gone in 1 week. I cannot watch children starve. I just cannot." The men realized they were not alone. They all felt the same way. The non-fraternization rules made sense on paper. Punish the enemy, make them suffer. But when you looked into a hungry child's eyes, the rules stopped making sense. By June 1945, the non-fraternization policy was impossible to enforce. The Canadian soldiers had human hearts. The German civilians were human beings in need. You could not keep those two things apart forever. Small acts of kindness multiplied across the whole occupation zone. A soldier would share his lunch. Another would help an old man carry firewood. Another would give medicine to a sick child. These were small things, but they added up. The official policy stayed in place until October 1945. But on the ground, in the streets and towns where soldiers and civilians lived side by side, the policy died much sooner. It died because men like Jamie MacDonald chose mercy over orders, because they chose to stay human. Years later, in 1982, a historian interviewed Anna about those days. She was an old woman then, but she remembered everything. She said, "That Canadian saved my children's lives. Without that food, Marie would have died. I know this in my heart. She was so weak. Another day, maybe two, and she would have been gone." Jamie MacDonald wrote about it too in a letter to a historian in the 1990s. He said, "I broke the rules that day. Would do it again in a heartbeat. Some orders deserved to be disobeyed." The small acts of kindness in Oldenburg spread like ripples in a pond. What started with one soldier sharing his lunch became something much bigger. Within weeks, the whole Canadian occupation zone began to change. The Canadian sector covered a huge area of northwest Germany. From the Dutch border through cities like Oldenburg, Bremen, and Wilhelmshaven. Over 180,000 Canadian troops controlled this territory. And slowly, quietly, most of them started breaking the non-fraternization rules. It was not organized. No officer gave an order to be kind, but the soldiers could not help themselves. When you see a child with a swollen belly from hunger, you give them food. When you see an old woman struggling to carry water, you help. That is just what humans do, and something surprising happened. When the Canadian soldiers started showing mercy, the German civilians started cooperating. Before, the Germans were silent and sullen. They obeyed orders but gave no extra help. They answered questions but volunteered nothing. Now that changed. German civilians began coming to Canadian headquarters with information. They told soldiers where Nazi weapons were hidden. They pointed out former SS officers trying to blend in with regular civilians. They helped identify dangerous men who still wanted to fight. One German man came to a Canadian captain with a map. The map showed where a group of Nazi holdouts were hiding in the forest. "They plan to attack your supply trucks," the man said. "I thought you should know." The Canadians arrested the group before anyone got hurt. This kind of cooperation happened more and more. The Germans realized the Canadians were not monsters. The Canadians were young men far from home, trying to do the right thing. And when those young men showed kindness, the Germans wanted to help them in return. The black market started to shrink too. Before, Germans traded everything on the black market because it was the only way to survive. Wedding rings for bread, family heirlooms for milk. But as Canadian soldiers began sharing food officially and unofficially, people needed the black market less. By August 1945, black market activity in the Canadian zone had dropped by 40% compared to May. That was a huge change in just 3 months. It meant people were getting what they needed through proper channels or through the quiet kindness of individual soldiers. The German people began to see a difference between their occupiers. They had 4 different armies controlling different parts of Germany. The Soviets in the east, the Americans in the south, the British and Canadians in the northwest, the French in the southwest. The Soviet zone was harsh, very harsh. Soviet soldiers had seen their own country devastated by German invasion. 20 million Soviet citizens died in the war. So Soviet troops showed no mercy to Germans. There were stories of terrible violence. German families feared the Soviet soldiers. The French zone was also tough. France had been occupied by Germany for 4 years. French people suffered under Nazi rule. So French soldiers did not feel generous toward Germans either. The occupation was strict and cold. The American zone was mixed. It depended on the unit and the commander. Some American soldiers were kind. Others were harsh. There was no pattern, but the Canadian and British zones became known as the better places to be. Word spread among German civilians. If you can get to the Canadian sector, go there. They treat you like humans. This reputation mattered. It helped keep the peace. It reduced resistance and sabotage. It made the occupation easier for everyone. The official policy finally started to catch up with reality. In October 1945, 5 months after the war ended, the Allied command relaxed the non-fraternization rules. Soldiers were now allowed to talk to Germans. They could help civilians with official permission. By December 1945, Canadian soldiers were authorized to give food aid through proper channels. The Army set up distribution points where German families could come for rations. It was all legal and organized now. In the spring of 1946, Canadian troops were actively helping rebuild. They worked on schools, they distributed medicine, they assisted at orphanages. The change from punishing the Germans to helping them rebuild happened in less than a year. The numbers told the story. In May 1945, over 3.2 million people in the British and Canadian zones faced starvation. That is more people than live in some whole countries. By December 1945, that number dropped to 800,000. Still terrible, but a massive improvement. By 1946, the Canadian Red Cross alone distributed 50,000 food parcels every month in their sector. The civilian death rate dropped even faster. In May 1945, people were dying from hunger and disease at terrible rates. By winter 1945, the death rate in the Canadian zone had fallen by 60%. 60% fewer people dying. That meant thousands of lives saved. For the Canadian soldiers, this change in policy helped their minds and hearts too. Army chaplains noticed that men who helped Germans seemed to suffer less from nightmares and trauma. Men who could do good work, who could help rebuild instead of just occupy, felt more human. One chaplain wrote in his report, "The men feel human, again when they help, not just occupy. Rebuilding schools does more for their souls than standing guard ever could." Mental health doctors noticed the same thing. Soldiers who engaged in humanitarian work had fewer symptoms of what we now call post-traumatic stress. Doing good helped heal them. On the German side, the change in attitude was dramatic. At first, most Germans saw all occupiers as the enemy, but within months, they started making distinctions. They called the Canadians and British the kind ones. They said the Canadians came as conquerors, but acted like neighbors. Former German soldiers had a hard time with this. They expected revenge. They expected cruelty. When Canadian soldiers helped their families instead, it confused them. One former Wehrmacht officer said, "I tried to kill these men in battle. Now they feed my children. War makes no sense." The mayor of Oldenburg, appointed by the Canadians in June 1945, said something that summed it up well. "The Canadians came as conquerors but left as friends. They could have crushed us. Instead, they lifted us up. We will remember this." The leadership in Ottawa, Canada's capital, noticed too. They saw that the humanitarian approach worked better than punishment. German civilians cooperated. Resistance faded. The occupation cost less money and fewer lives. General Crerar, who commanded the 1st Canadian Army, wrote a report. He said that showing mercy made the occupation easier and more successful. Kindness was not weakness, it was smart strategy. The Canadian government began planning long-term aid programs for Germany, not just for the occupation period, but for years after. Canada would help rebuild German schools, hospitals, and farms. This investment in Germany's future paid off in the decades to come. Veterans Affairs in Canada noticed something else. Soldiers who came home from Germany had less psychological trauma than soldiers who came home from the Pacific War. The difference? In Germany, soldiers spent months helping rebuild. In the Pacific, they came straight home from combat. The transition mattered. Jamie MacDonald's small act of sharing his lunch did not change the war. The war was already over. But it changed the peace. His choice, and thousands of choices like Kainyeret by other soldiers, helped Germany recover faster. It helped former enemies become friends. It showed that even in war's darkest hours, individual humans could choose light over darkness. Anna Hoffman and her 3 children survived. That is the most important part of this story. They all lived through those terrible months of 1945. They made it to 1946 when things got better. They survived because of one soldier's kindness and the food he shared. Little Marie, the youngest at 3 years old, fully recovered from her near starvation. She grew up healthy and strong. When she became an adult, she chose to be a nurse. She said she wanted to help people the way her family was helped. She worked at a hospital in Oldenburg for 35 years, taking care of sick children. She never forgot what hunger felt like. Carl, the 6-year-old boy, learned English as he grew up. By 1946, when he was 7, he could speak it pretty well. From 1946 to 1949, he worked as a translator for the Canadian Occupation Forces. He helped Canadian soldiers communicate with German civilians. It was his way of saying thank you. He remembered the soldier who saved his life, even though he never met him. Greta, the oldest at 9, carried the memory of hunger for her whole life. She never wasted food, not ever. When she grew up and had her own children, she taught them to be grateful for every meal. In the 1990s, she became an advocate for refugee children. She worked with organizations that helped kids escaping war zones. She knew what it felt like to be helpless and hungry, and she wanted to help others. Anna herself lived a long life. She died in 1994 at the age of 83. For all those years, she kept a photograph on her mantle. It was a picture of Canadian soldiers in Oldenburg in 1945. She did not know which one was the soldier who helped her. She never learned his name. But she kept the photo as a reminder that even in the darkest times, good people exist. Private James MacDonald came home to Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, in March 1946. The ship that brought him back docked in Halifax. He took a train home to a small town on the coast. His mother and father and 2 little sisters were waiting at the station. They hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. But Jamie was different when he came home. War changes men. He had nightmares, but not about combat. His nightmares were about the starving people he saw, the hollow-eyed children, the desperate mothers. He would wake up in a cold sweat, thinking about all the people he could not help. Jamie became a teacher. He taught at the local elementary school for 32 years. He was known as a kind teacher, patient and gentle with his students. He always emphasized one lesson above all others. We are all human beings first. Everything else comes second. Jamie never talked publicly about giving food to Anna. He was a modest man. He did not think what he did was special. When people asked about the war, he would say, "I did my duty." He never mentioned breaking the rules to help a starving family. Only in the 1980s, when his grandchildren asked about the war, did Jamie tell the story. He sat them down and explained what happened that day in May 1945. He showed them the embroidered handkerchief he still carried. "I kept this for 40 years, he told them, to remind me to stay human, no matter what." In 1987, something amazing happened. Jamie's grandson was 16 years old and studying German in school. He became curious about his grandfather's story. He wanted to find the woman Jamie helped. So he wrote letters to the German Red Cross, asking for help finding Anna Hoffman in Oldenburg. It took 6 months, but they found her. Anna was 76 years old, living in a small apartment in the same city. The Red Cross arranged a phone call between Anna and Jamie. Neither of them spoke the other's language very well. Anna's English was better than it had been in 1945, but still broken. Jamie spoke no German at all, but they understood each other perfectly. Anna said, "Thank you for my children's lives. Thank you for showing an enemy can be human." Her voice shook with emotion. Jamie said, "I was just sharing my lunch, ma'am. You would have done the same." He was crying. At 64 years old, this tough old soldier cried talking to a German grandmother. They talked for 45 minutes. Both of them cried. They shared what happened to their families. Anna told him about her children and grandchildren. Jamie told her about becoming a teacher, about his own kids and grandkids. They were just two old people who shared a moment 42 years earlier, a moment that changed both their lives. Jamie died in 1997 at the age of 74. His family buried him with full military honors, and they buried him with Anna's embroidered handkerchief in his breast pocket. He carried it over his heart for 52 years. In death, it went with him. Other Canadian soldiers had similar stories. Corporal Robert Chen, a Chinese Canadian, found a 7-year-old war orphan living in a bombed-out building. The boy had no family left. Chen could not officially adopt him, but he found the boy's aunt in another city and helped get them reunited. Private Sarah Thompson worked in the nursing corps. She set up an unofficial clinic where she treated German children for free. She gave them medicine that was supposed to be only for Allied personnel. She saved dozens of kids from diseases like typhoid and tuberculosis. Sergeant William Blackfoot was an Indigenous Canadian from Alberta. He organized food drives among his unit. The men pooled their rations and extra food, and Blackfoot distributed it to German families. He kept careful lists of who needed help most. These stories only came out decades later. The soldiers did not brag about breaking rules. They just did what felt right and kept quiet about it. German soldiers, the former enemies, had their own perspective. Werner Müller had been a pilot in the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. After the war, he met some Canadian veterans at a reconciliation event in the 1970s. He said, "My children were fed by the men I tried to kill months before. War makes no sense." Heinrich Becker was a Wehrmacht veteran who became pen pals with a Canadian veteran in the 1970s. They exchanged letters for 20 years until they both died. Former enemies became friends through letters. In 1995, Oldenburg City Council held a special ceremony. They honored the unknown Canadian soldiers who saved their children 50 years earlier. Anna Hoffman attended in a wheelchair. She was 84 years old and very frail. She told her story to the crowd. Jamie's family was invited to the ceremony. Jamie was too sick to travel, but his daughter went on his behalf. She accepted the city's gratitude for her father. She cried when Anna told the story of the young soldier who shared his lunch. The story of Anna and Jamie lived on long after both of them were gone. Their children told their grandchildren. The grandchildren told their own kids. The story passed down through generations, growing more important with each telling. In 2005, the city of Oldenburg decided to build a memorial. They wanted to honor the Allied soldiers who fed their hungry children 60 years earlier. The memorial stands in a small park near the city center. It is a bronze sculpture showing a soldier kneeling down to share bread with a small child. The soldier's face is kind. The child's face shows hope. The plaque on the memorial does not list any names. It just says, "To the Allied soldiers who fed our hungry." This is because there were so many soldiers who showed kindness. Jamie MacDonald was one of thousands. Each one made a choice to be human when the rules said to be cold. Anna's family donated something precious to the local museum. They gave the cloth bag, the same bag Anna carried that day in May 1945. The bag that Jamie filled with food. It sits in a glass case with a small card. The card says, "Ein Geschenk des Lebens." That means a gift of life in German. Marie Hoffman, Anna's youngest daughter, did something special before she died. She established a scholarship fund for Canadian students who want to study in Germany. She called it the Bread and Humanity Fund. Every year, 3 Canadian students get money to spend a year in Germany, learning the language and culture. Marie wanted to keep the connection alive between the two countries. As of 2024, Anna's 3 children have had 14 grandchildren and 31 great-grandchildren. That is 45 people who would not exist if Jamie had not shared his lunch in 1945. Think about that. One small act of kindness led to 45 new lives over 3 generations. Marie Hoffman Schmidt, Anna's great-granddaughter, keeps the story alive today. She visits schools in Germany and tells children about what happened. She explains how one soldier's choice saved her family. She shows them a copy of the embroidered handkerchief her great-grandmother gave to Jamie. The relationship between Germany and Canada became one of the strongest in all of Europe. There are no tensions between these two nations. They trade freely. Students exchange between the countries all the time. Cultural programs bring Germans and Canadians together constantly. Many historians say this strong friendship has roots in the humane occupation of 1945. Compare this to Germany's relationship with Russia. That relationship is still difficult even today. The harsh Soviet occupation left scars that never fully healed. Or look at Germany and France. Those nations get along now, but it took much longer to build trust. The German-Canadian friendship bloomed quickly because of how Canadian soldiers treated German civilians in 1945. The military learned lessons from this too. When NATO formed in 1949, they created clear rules for how occupation forces should treat civilians. The rules emphasized dignity and humanitarian care. The phrase, "hearts and minds," became important in military thinking. Generals learned that you cannot win a lasting peace through cruelty. You win it through mercy. The Canadian military became known for peacekeeping work around the world. From the 1950s through today, Canadian soldiers serve on peacekeeping missions in dozens of countries. They have a reputation for being fair and humane. Many people trace this reputation back to how Canadians handled the occupation of Germany. Those young soldiers in 1945 set a standard that their country still tries to live up to. For Canada as a nation, these stories became part of national identity. Canada likes to think of itself as a peacekeeper nation, not a warrior nation. The story of soldiers like Jamie MacDonald reinforces this idea. Yes, Canadians fought bravely in World War II, but they also showed mercy to defeated enemies. Both things are true, and both make Canadians proud. Germany also needed these stories. After the war, Germans struggled with terrible guilt. Their country started a war that killed 60 million people. How do you live with that? How do you move forward? Stories like Anna and Jamie's helped. They showed that even in the darkest time, not everything was evil. They showed that humanity survived, that mercy existed, that hope was possible. In 2008, Jamie's family traveled to Germany. His son, daughter, and 3 grandchildren made the trip. They met with the Hoffman family. Anna and Jamie were both gone by then, but their families connected. They had dinner together. They shared photos and stories. They laughed and cried together. Now the 2 families exchange Christmas cards every year. The Hoffmans send cards from Germany. The McDonalds send cards from Canada. They have never met in person again after 2008, but they stay in touch. A friendship that started with bread and corned beef in 1945 continues across generations in the 2020s. The story gets retold when the world faces new crises. During the Syrian refugee crisis in 2015, people shared Jamie and Anna's story online. The message was simple: refugees are human beings who need help. During the Ukraine war in 2022, the story spread again on social media. Millions of people read it and were reminded that enemies are still human. Military schools use this story in ethics classes. When do you disobey orders because the orders are wrong? That is a hard question. Jamie's story helps students think through it. He broke the rules for a good reason. He risked punishment to save lives. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. Peace education programs tell the story too. Teachers use it to help children understand that wars have to end eventually. Enemies become neighbors. Hatred has to turn into cooperation. That process starts with individual people choosing mercy over revenge. The story teaches us something deep about human nature. War brings out our worst. It creates conditions for cruelty, revenge, and dehumanization. Soldiers are taught to see enemies as less than human. Otherwise, killing them is too hard, but war also creates opportunities for our best, for courage, compassion, and mercy. Jamie could have turned Anna away. He had every reason to. The rules said no. His training said no. His commanders said no. But his heart said yes. That 20-second decision on a May morning in 1945 mattered more than any battle. It showed that even when the world is burning, individual humans can choose light over darkness. Even when commanders scream for vengeance, one soldier can remember that enemies are human beings who bleed and love and suffer just like everyone else. Anna lived 49 years after that day. Every single one of those years, she remembered the enemy soldier who saved her babies. Jamie carried her handkerchief over his heart for 52 years. It reminded him that he had honored his mother's wish to stay human. Their story echoes across time because it speaks a truth that war tries to silence. We are all human beings first. Everything else, nations and armies and flags and uniforms, everything else is second. In 1995, at the memorial dedication ceremony, Anna spoke to the crowd. She was 84 years old, in a wheelchair, her voice shaking but strong. She said, "They called us enemies, but he fed my babies like they were his own. That is when I knew the war was over. Not because the generals signed papers, but because one soldier remembered we all bleed the same red. We all love our children the same fierce way. If a man can show mercy to his enemy's children while his commanders scream for vengeance, then maybe, just maybe, the rest of us can find our way to peace." She died 1 year later, but her words live on, carved into the memorial in Oldenburg. Visitors stop and read them. Some cry, some take photos. All of them leave thinking about what one person can do when they choose mercy. In memory of the millions who starved, in memory of the thousands who showed mercy, and in memory of the few whose stories remind us that even in total war, total humanity is possible.